one question. I would prefer Dr. Azmi to answer the question. I don't know how to put it, but this issues, I think, lingers on to this, to my opinion, humble opinion, that there is this provision in the rules and regulation. I don't know how it was, in terms of history, how it was formulated, developed, and written, but the way I see it is so generic in nature, very, very generic, in the sense that whenever issues come up, this generic issue provision becomes so debated, and depending on which side of the fence you are in, it becomes very emotional, very, very what you call, with great argument against and for it. I wonder whether, when it was first discussed many, many years ago, before I was even born, was this generic thing intentional to allow, if such a case crops up in the future, there is room for what you call maneuver, depending on which side of the fence you are. Because if it's, the provision is so detailed, then there is no more argument. We no longer need...
Bro, which article are you talking about?
What I'm saying is, let's say, for example, in the Constitution, you know, and we tend to say that the reasons that was assigned seems to be very generic.
Are you talking about specific articles or what?
No, some of the things you mentioned just now.
Article 3, for example. That's the most generic one that I can think of.
Generic lah. So we use that thing to ban certain things, which on the other side, how can you use that to ban this one? But the provision is such a way that they can use that to cover anything under the umbrella. So what do we do about it? Do we go and revise the law to make it more specific? So if it becomes more specific, there is no more argument lah.
Is it so? I think the question is quite clear.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is there? Do you agree that whatever provision, there is this very generic definition of things which can cover anything that the authorities might want to use, and when we go for arbitration, whatever it is still subject to interpretation, and I do not know whether we are the victim of history ke apa ke. So I hope we can give some enlightenment on this one lah. By the way, I'm not a lawyer. I'm an engineering background. So driven by logic lah, binary 0 or 1 lah. So forgive me lah if the question might sound stupid or
Dr. Azmi will tackle.
Whenever there is controversy related to Muslim matters, for instance, marital rape, or recently the laundrette case in Johor, many factions of society would give their views, especially on social media, including non-Muslims. And usually this faction of society will get lambasted by the Muslims saying, stay out of this, this is an Islamic matter, it does not require your interference. What is your view on this? Because my opinion is that, yes, I might not be a Muslim, this is a Muslim matter, but if it breeds bigotry and intolerance, then in a way it affects me. So that's my argument, but what is your view on this? Thank you. My name is Yan.
Hi, my name is Robert. I've gone to quite a number of these forums relating to Islamic issues and stuff like that. So it seems to me that one of the biggest elephant in the room that we have to grapple with is actually regards to why are we giving so much funding to religious bodies? Okay, that's the big elephant down there, and we keep on talking about this year in and year out, and these guys are still getting the kind of money. So it reminds me about the kind of movie, in a mafia movie, where the mafia don puts a gun to your head and say, give me your shop and give you your money. Then you can tell him, no, I know your mother, this is actually illegal, and blah, blah, blah. You can say all your reasonings. but they will tell you, hey, please don't forget who's holding the gun. No? You know? So the question now is that, is there a way, whether organizationally or through some other means, legally perhaps, how you can actually reduce the funding from the public bus to religious bodies, but giving them the reason that, hey, if you want to promote your religion or whatever you want to promote, please get your money from your followers rather than from the public bus. You know, is there a way to do this? Because I thought that would probably sort of put a lot of brakes to this kind of thing that we are facing. Your comments.
When you say generic terms, where's my friend? See, this is a problem. You see, we have to depend on the judiciary. We cannot have specific, as it is, our constitution is bloody long. The American constitution is very short, but ours is so long, and yet we seem to have so many problems with it. It's already very, very specific. We cannot cover every eventuality, but the courts must be able to make a decision based on not just the history of the Constitution, but also the basic founding principles of the Constitution. For example, do we respect freedom? If you respect freedom, then anything which restricts freedom has to be looked at with a particularly jaundiced eye. You see? And that's the problem. You see, our judiciary is very literal. For example, so you have a law that says we're restricting your freedom of speech because of national security. The judiciary will look at it, oh yeah, they say it's about national security. They don't question whether it's really about national security. So for me the problem is because at the end of, you cannot trust the government. Nobody ever can trust the government or the legislatures because they always make whatever is important for them, right? At the end of the day, we need a judiciary which understands what a constitution is about and to use it. But over the years, they've become worse in the sense that I think they've become more and more literal in their interpretation, which is why the generic terms that you're so worried about becomes even more dangerous because they don't seem to have an underlying philosophy of law as to what is important. The basic structure of the Constitution, for example, they don't seem to think about it. I mean, like one judge, for God's sake, he says we don't have separation of powers in Malaysia. Right? Separation of powers, judiciary, executive, legislature. He says we don't have separation of powers because it's not. The word separation of powers is not in the Constitution. Even though the Constitution breaks executive, legislature, and judiciary into 3 separate parts, he says that, so unless you write it in bright red crayon, separation of powers, it doesn't exist. I mean, that is the kind of literalist judicial decisions that we're getting, and that's the problem. So how do we fix that? We've got to get new judges. Get my students, okay? Don't go UIA and all that. No, get my students.
Muslim matters. Stay out of this. It's an Islamic matter. Yeah. And you wanted our view. Ideally, I think there's a lot of toxicity out there. I've read some of the comments, stay out of this, it's got nothing to do with you, you're a non and all that kind of nonsense. I believe we need to respond. I wrote down here, politely respond and explain why it affects you, like you said just now. I do know that it's easier said than done. When you politely respond, you can get, nasty things coming your way. Not only, when you're discussing Trump, for example, in America, and when he became politician, some of us were discussing him, and some of the people who were supporting Trump, saying that he was God's gift and stuff like that, and they were very nasty as well, within Malaysia. We're talking about within Malaysia. So it's not only as regards this Islam, but I do appreciate that much of this does come out, yeah. So it's easier said than done, but I think the only way is to try and respond in a rational, polite way, and face the nastiness there. The language can be really, really nasty, and it is really nasty. How do you respond to that? I think if you add to the nastiness, it just makes things worse. Nobody's going to be listening to you, nor you to him, or to him or her. Yeah, so. It ends. It doesn't end, when it becomes like that. So I think there is a need to figure out a different narrative, a different language, a different way of conveying our what's the word for it? Critique, or our unhappiness with what is being said and our right to say what we want to say. Robert, why is there so much funding given to religious bodies? You're going to get me into trouble if I say anything about this. Is there a way to reduce the funding? Reduce the funding, I think that's something the lawyers would know. Personally, I believe yes. If the funding, let's say, what was it, 1 billion last year, didn't really bring back any worthwhile benefits for Muslims, I think there is a need to reduce the funding. I think there is a need to question where that funding goes to. I mean, when Muslim women who are divorced face so much problems getting their way through courts, let alone get nafkah, is it? Yeah, is it nafkah? Yeah. And I know personally friends of mine who've experienced this, and I think that is the role of the Islamic Department. People who can't afford, poor people in Malaysia, having to fill in so many forms to just get a little bit of money. I think that's their dignity is at stake here, and I think there is a need for so-called religious departments to act in a more humane manner. Yeah, I think there is a need for education of those people. One, and yes, if they don't produce results, if they don't benefit the people, yes, I think there is a need to reduce the funding. How are we going to reduce the funding? I think it will require political will, because you try to reduce those kind of things, you lose possible political support from certain groups, and therefore there's always that political angle to it. Yeah, okay.
They cut university funding by 40% without any problems. So they can cut funding if they want to.
And hospitals. I just wanted to, this question about non-Muslims interfering comes up all the time. But in fact, the Islamic authorities are interfering in your lives all the time too, So from CIS standpoint is that as long as Islam is the source of law and public policy, which affects all of us, you have absolutely the right to say something about it. And in the case of the Muslim-only laundrette, that's very clear, right? It's about dividing between Muslim and non-Muslim. So you have something to say about that. And it's not about, okay, I'll just take my business elsewhere. It is a very fundamental, concept of wanting to divide people. Same with, I think, the halal and non-halal trolleys and things like that. Different lines for people, etc. It is the beginning of apartheid. And therefore, we all have a right to say something to stop it. Yeah, all these little things matter.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Sean. I've got two questions, one on a global level, one on a local level. On a global level is, if you look at history, during the Dark Ages, there was a lot of issues with Christianity, where they doubted reason and so forth. And the Islamic community was thriving at that time. Whereas today, the Western community is thriving and the Islamic community is going down. Is history replicating itself? That's my first question. My second question has got to do on a national level. When we talk about repression, and repression in the sense of that, you look at sexual education. When they refuse to put sexual education in schools, you've got a lot of baby dumping cases and so forth. How about when it comes to religion? And you are getting a lot of social ills. A good example is Kelantan. No offense to the Kelantanese, but the facts are the facts. You've got massive brain drain by the Muslim community. Look at Jabatan Statistics. A lot of Malay Muslims are going out of the country because they cannot stand the Islamic pressure in the country. And yes, you've got people that are voicing out like G25 and so forth, but these are prominent people. But people on the ground, smaller people, are afraid to do so. Is this because should this change at a home level? Let me cite the example of Sharom and his wife. Sharom is a Muslim, his wife is a Hindu. He teaches his children how to think, not what to think. So there's no pressure on religion. And if this kind of mentality is adapted, will the Muslim community, or any religion for that matter, be mature enough to accept it? Thank you.
My name is Murat. I am joining the events of IRF, this is my maybe third time or fourth time in the last 2 months, and During this event, I noticed something. So mine will be a question or a recommendation for the organizer or for the speakers. Today we had 4 speakers and 1 moderator, and even the title. All are supporting just one idea. We don't have any opposition idea here. So you are complaining about freedom of speech, lack of freedom of speech, lack of freedom of expression, but this was ironic for me. Why you don't invite anybody from Jakim or... I mean, because it's like a shooting an empty, you know, there is no goalkeeper here, just we are shooting. So after having some fun, I'm getting a little disturbed, and I need discussion and debate. So I suggest more different opinions. Thank you very much. Yeah, even the title is the reason a threat. So you are the reason, other side is nonsense, right? So this is little disrespectful for me. I think everybody has a reason for his action, even a terrorist has a reason. So we shouldn't alienate the other side. We should give a space for all opinions, in my opinion.
So you should invite the terrorists also to join the discussion on terrorism?
Yeah, he has sacrificed his life, he has a reason.
He's already dead.
Hi, my name is Phoenix, and I'm an international relations student at this university. My question is relating to the Malaysian government, refugees, and its relation to religion. So Malaysia is not a party to the 1951 Refugee Convention or its protocol, and this creates barriers. This makes it difficult for the Malaysian government to be able to provide refugees with the access to education, to work, and the right to not be repatriated. But Malaysia has seen to be helping refugees, but unfortunately it seems that the Malaysian government has historically been cherry-picking the refugees that they choose to help. And these refugees seem to be of a specific demographic and of a specific religion. And in my personal opinion, I believe that if the Malaysian government is serious about upholding universal human rights,
When did they ever say that? Universal.
if the Malaysian government is serious about human rights and helping refugees, in my opinion, I believe that they shouldn't cherry-pick who they choose to help, because a human being is a human life. So what is your opinion on that? Thank you.
Yes, Marina?
I mean, the about inviting people with different opinions thing, us very nice liberal pluralist people, we always like to do this, except we never get a response. That's one thing. So, you know, yeah, it'll be great. We can all start screaming at each other here. It'll be great. Also, that the other side also is not keen to have all sorts of different opinions. So yes, I agree. It's a kind of a standoff. We speak to people who think like us, and they speak to people who think like them. And very, you know, never the twain shall meet. It is a problem. And until we
They don't speak to people like, they arrest people like us.
yeah, that's true. I mean, basically, we get arrested. I mean, you know. So it is an unfortunate problem, but I don't think it's limited to just here. It's everywhere where it's the same thing. The refugee question. Are we cherry-picking refugees? I think, you know, yeah, it'd be really nice if we would sign a refugee convention and then take on all the Rohingya refugees here. And let me tell you, the first people who would start complaining is about just every other Malaysian citizen there is. I mean, that's the reality. I know this because I talk about refugees all the time on my Facebook page, and I get accused of highlighting refugees of a certain faith only. But if anyone has been reading any of the reports on what is happening with the Rohingyas, mostly done by the non-Muslim press, such as the New York Times or the Guardian, it is absolutely genocide. So please don't accuse anyone who is concerned about the Rohingyas as being only thinking about one type of refugee. You know, most of the refugees in the world, unfortunately, happen to be Muslim. But you know, if you're going, who's doing the cherry picking here is my question, really. And you know, if you talk about universality, every single person, every single human being has a right to live. So, you know, if you are considering that we are cherry picking about which refugees we'll support, then complain about Trump absolutely refusing to have any refugees of a particular faith or any migrants. Is that cherry picking or not? So, I mean, you know, universal is universal lah. You know, it's you know, if you believe in universal human rights, every single person is equal to one another. So, you know, let's be careful when we talk about cherry picking. You know, it really distresses me. People who feel that they should have all human rights don't want to apply that to anyone else. But let me also say this about, particularly about what's happening with the Rohingyas. Our DPM goes to Bangladesh, to the refugee camps, and promises all sorts of things and leads prayers and all that, and we will sympathize all we want with the Rohingyas as long as they stay over there and not bring them over here. Because once they bring over here, then the very same constituency that they want to appeal to for votes by going to Bangladesh and doing all these things are going to protest, right? And so they risk losing that. So it's all a game, and the poor Rohingyas are being made use of for this political gain, in my opinion, and it's very sad. I don't know how anyone has the conscience to let all this happen, not just us, but all over the world. But there you go.
Thank you. My name is Peter Chong, and I'm just making a comment about the question just now. Should non-Muslims continue to speak about Muslim issues? I paid an ultimate price. I had my freedom taken away from me for 7 days because I held a candle on the street for Pastor Raymond and the other 3 missing people. I was kidnapped for 7 days, if you recall the news. Does it mean I will stop speaking up for Muslim issues? No, I will not. But I agree with the professor with the perfect hairstyle. He said that we speak, but we should not be rude, and you know, the language we use should be proper. And I agree with that. Because what you read in Facebook, some of the languages are just disgraceful. Yeah? But we will continue. Not just for Muslims to speak up, I think non-Muslims should also speak up because it affects all of us. Yeah? So I will continue. I will continue to speak up, and I hope that all of us will do that as well.
Just a very basic philosophical point. We talk, is reason a threat to faith and society? Equally, can society and faith be a threat to reason? And which should take precedence? We all know throughout history that society evolves, faith too evolves. Here we are assuming that faith is monolithic, or society is monolithic, maybe in Malaysia. But should it be that way? So, you know, equally, society and faith can be a threat to reason. And ultimately, you know, which is more important? We have to decide.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ikram. I just want to quote from Al-Ghazali, which is النقل عقل من خارج والعقل نقل من داخل. I think my question is for Dr. Isham. So during the Al-Ghazali, the reason itself has been very on discussing. Okay, so back to the title of our discussion today. Does the reason has the limitation? So if the reason go beyond the limitation, that it will treat the faith and society. So if it has the limitation, what it is. So if it not has a limitation, so I think it will not be a threat. So that's my question.
Hey guys, I'm Vinesh. I'm a student in psychology. All right, so I think we pretty much have a similar view that reason is a threat to power more than faith, right? But however, religion is somewhat the organic tool that gets deployed when we are pointing towards that, right? We aim towards a particular law, but then the religious argument or the religious blackmail aspect of it comes in. Now, my concern is our biggest strength here is conversation. Through so much of dialogue, through forums and seminars like this, we keep getting deeper into discourse. But however, they seem to have more prominence over these issues in the sense like you may call the opposing parties, but they refuse to come because they refuse to engage in that one aspect in which we hold strength in, which is conversation, right? But however, they have access to big laws and legal powers, and our weapons are just microphones and slideshows. So the odds are not very much in our favor at the moment. So I guess my question is, will this be the only way that we can strive forward through more conversation, through being nicer to people on Facebook, or strategically, are there any other ways that we can bring forward a culture of reason and rational liberalism forward? Thanks.
Hi, I would just like to follow up with my earlier question. So thank you so much, Ms. Marina, for addressing the question. Now, I would like to clarify myself. What I meant earlier was, and you may correct me if I'm wrong, but what the Malaysian government did with the Syrian refugees was that they seem to have a double standard system where Syrian refugees were given a fast track in receiving a refugee card previously, and now the Malaysian government seems to be doing a similar thing with the Rohingya refugees, where the Rohingya refugees are being given a fast track in getting the refugee cards, and this is what I have gathered from my personal experience in having the privilege of working with refugees in Malaysia. So is that, what is your opinion on that?
Thank you.
Sorry,
yes,
just to
please, go ahead.
answer that, the government doesn't issue refugee cards. UNHCR does.
Yeah. Sorry, I stand corrected. UNHCR, yes. UNHCR is the one who issues the refugee cards, but the Malaysian government has created a system where it's easier and faster for refugees in Malaysia, and this was published in the Star, specifically Rohingya refugees to receive employment in Malaysia.
Well, those Rohingyas that are here have been here for 30 years. With absolutely nothing, So it's not the new lot, So all those refugees, okay. We're going to talk about Rohingya. Rohingyas are the people that nobody wants. Nobody wants. It's really hard to resettle them. I just read about 40 families or something that just got resettled in Chicago. Like, wow, what? How did they get through? But everyone else can be resettled. Well, Australia doesn't take them either. Doesn't take Syrians or Afghans or anyone. They put them on a prison on an island somewhere, which is far worse than anything. And the rest, the others, the Karens, the whatever, they do get resettled much easier. And often it's because of their faith. So, I think you have to balance. I'm not defending. I know a lot of the stuff that the government does that's not right when it comes to refugees. I think refugees all have a right to work, all have a right to go to school, etc., etc. But, until we sign that refugee convention, they feel like they don't have a legal backing to do it. But, I don't know whether it's, specific to that. Which particular groups are not getting these cards? But those are also the ones that are able to be resettled far easier than any of these.
Thank you.
I never thought anyone would ask a philosophy question at 5 o'clock on Sunday. It's an off day, so. Now, going back to the one on Ghazali, the issue of whether there is the limitation of the mind. If the mind is going to limit the mind, then there should be no limitations, right? You're basically arguing that I'm going to use reason to limit reason, which seems contradictory. After all, the only reason that only method that we can understand anything is actually through reason. So now arguing that is actually counterproductive to argue that that reason should limit reason. That to me in itself seems obvious. But well, we can discuss it later on. On your issue of whether reason can be whether irrationality is a threat or reason is a threat. Again, sorry.
If society sees reason as a threat, isn't that worrying? Or if faith sees reason as a threat?
I totally agree with Marina. It's not the issue of it's the misuse of the word reason. Suddenly, it's actually a threat to power. It's not a threat to reason, because you use reason in order to justify the threat. But it's a threat to your status quo. That's why, as I said in the beginning, when the Prophet first came, he seemed to actually threaten the status quo. When the joke was when one person told me, when the Jahiliyyah, the non-Muslims came to see him, right? So he said, okay, we can accept your idea of one God. It's not a big deal. But your idea that we should treat our slaves like we treat ourselves, that's a big deal. We can't do that. So they could not. It was not an issue of the idea of if the Allah issue was even an issue. It was not an issue. It was an issue of that they had to change their privilege, their status quo. They didn't want to see everybody as equal. So it was a threat to their power and their status quo. So it's a far more complicated argument, I know, but it's Sunday, right? So I get away with it. So thank you.
A comment on Murad's assertion or allegation. One-sided panel. Where's Jakim? I think we are working on the assumption that we live in a what's the word for it? Level playing field. Yeah, level playing field, as it were. If you look at that situation another way, isn't it? It's the other way around. It's the other side alienating minority groups, I feel, in the context of Malaysia. Yeah? Providing their decisions, their actions, without actually having to defend most of the time their actions. So, and just disregarding the thoughts, the beliefs, the ways of other people, and accusing them, calling them names. Yeah, liberals, Azmi, Sharom. Yeah, names like that. Yeah, so actually marginalizing people. So. And I do think IRF has many times tried to get the other side, as it were, to come to our.
Last time we got the other side, it was Mustafa Afil.
Yeah. What happened then? Yeah.
That is one of the members of the IKIM representative.
Yeah.
IKIM.
So anyway, just that it is often the other side that's alienating the minority groups. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I would like to make a very brief announcement. It's in regards to the ongoing online petition on change.org, joint statement on crackdowns on intellectuals. So we would like to invite everybody to join we need to get as many individual petitioning there as possible. It's in regards to Dr. Farouk's facing charges on 3rd December, which is very close actually. So we really invite everybody to share this link of the petition on your social media, as well as support and advocate for this case. With that, I would like to thank our distinguished panel. Dr. Azmi, Sharom, thank you so much for Datin, Paduka, Marina, Mahathir, thank you so much also for sharing your views today. Professor Zaharom, Nain, thank you so much also for hospitality, as well as Dr. Isham, Pawan, Ahmad, thank you for joining us today. Dr. Farouk, thank you so much, and also Dr. Joanne, everybody, thank you for your time. May proceed for the refreshment this afternoon and watch forward for other IRF events in the near future.